Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at line gesture. Line gesture is a type of gesture drawing where the artist indicates the object that you're drawing with lines. Line gesture is the most common type of gestural drawing. It's also one of the fastest methods of gestural drawing. It can be as fast as 5 seconds to 30 seconds. Line gestures specifies direction, movement, proportion, and the angle of the objects that you're drawing. There are lots of types of line gestures, but if I told you that you only had 10 seconds to draw a figure or capture the essence of an apple, most people would automatically create what we call a contour line gesture. So what is a contour line gesture? It's a gestural application which looks specifically at the contour edges of the object that you're drawing. So here you can see all of these edges that they're drawing. It's all about the exterior outside edges of the form, and even of this gesture drawing of pencil cup, you can see that. Contour line gesture is drawing the edges and contours of the form, but it's also looking for the quick direction and motion and the generalness of the form itself. So here you can see a contour of the arm, and here you can see the gestural application of that arm. It's really looking at the movement that's there. Contour line gesture is not the only kind of line gesture that there is out there. There's lots of different types of line gestures that look beyond just the edges of the forms and objects that you're drawing. So here's some examples of a few. You see the longest line here. You can see the longest line of that figure and this figure and here and here. You definitely see that. And then on the same figures, if you use longest line and simplified shape, you can see the simple shapes lined up on top of the longest line. So they're building this up. So here you have your object to draw. You have the longest line of the form, and here you have the simplified shapes on that longest line of the form. And this is what of that same exact object, this is what a contour line gesture looking at the edges might look like. In simplified shape gesture, artists look for simple shapes that they see in the object, and they use those simple shapes as building blocks placed on top of one another and next to one another to kind of build the form that they're looking at. So here you can see they're using a lot of wedge and box shapes and triangles, and here's a square with circles inside of it. You're seeing this wedge shape here, definitely using the simplified shape method to build this object. Here they're using the circles to build this and kind of conical oval shapes that are there. There are lots of type of line and simplified shape gestures that are out there, like seen here in the ovoid forms gestures. So it's a simplified shape type of gesture that uses primarily ovals and circles to build the form. So here you can see they're kind of finding the shape and direction of the ovals to draw this horse. Lots of people use this, especially in muscle structure in the figure. Another type of line and simplified shape gesture is something called the stick figure and the stick figure solid gestures. So here you can see the stick figure plane, and they do have some simple shape in here as well. But in the three basic solids, you have the head, the chest, and then the pelvic area. And you can see that they're using that. And you don't have to necessarily use ovoid forms for these simple solids. You could also use cylinders and or squares and boxes as well to build those stick figure forms. There's also line gestural types which look for mass. Now, I don't want to talk a lot about mass gesture because we have a whole nother lecture on that. But it's basically the silhouette shape of the form that you're looking at. And some of the line gestural types that look for mass gesture are called scribble gesture and scribble cross contour gesture. So here you can see it's looking more at the mass shape of the form, and here they're actually cross contouring areas on this image, cross contouring the bottles that you're seeing here. But they're looking at that rather than the edge, they're looking at it more as a mass gesture. Lastly, there's also line gestures which are called sustained gestures. And anytime you hear the word sustained, that just means that you're taking more time, from 3 to 5 minutes on whatever it is that you're doing. And when you have more time, then you also can start to put in more information. You might have what we call committed lines, value, light source, obvious essential details like the skirt that's here. You can see they're really getting the turn and torque of the body. I even see where her shirt ends and her collar is, her hair and the ponytail, as well as some facial features and socks. So I'm getting a lot more detail in this particular one. Here we have committed lines, where all of these lines that are in here are not committed until you get to these outside edges and inside edges that they're very sure of. And here they're starting to put in value sources, darknesses that you might see where one leg is catching more value than another leg that's crossed over it, and stuff like that. Committed lines are those lines which are often darker, wider, and actually accurate in describing your form. They're never sketchy lines. When you get really good at gestural drawing, you might have more committed lines to start with, and therefore you have a lot more time to put in other information about your subject, like the value and the details, like you're seeing here. We see the committed lines in places, but we're also starting to feel that there is a value source down here in the darkness below. Do you see the value source? And we're also seeing details like eyes and the horn and the wrinkles that are in the skin. So here you can look at the committed lines in these gestures, and you can see definitely a bunch of simplified shape put on top of one another, but here's the committed lines that you're seeing in the figure itself, where they're very sure of where the waist is turning and the dog's edge and contour is after they've done the simple shapes in it. You can just see those really dramatic committed lines. Here you can see a time and progression that's spent on gestural studies. So you have the 10-second gesture study, the 30-second gesture study, the 1-minute gesture study, the 2-minute gesture study, and you can see you get more detailed as you go up. These are all 1 minute, but you can see also that they start to get into a little bit more committed line because they've been practicing just a little bit more. But look how many lines have happened in here to get to those more committed lines. Constant practice is really essential to accurate gesture studies. I mean, this is Auguste Rodin's gesture study for a running man. Look how many lines happened before he got to these committed ones. And he's correcting them with the commitments in here. The more you do, the more accurate you're going to become. So do as much as possible. All right, I'll see you in the next video.